Morning, everyone. Joseph WAMACK here, pastor of the Savannah First Seventh-day Adventist Church, coming to you with another weekly devotional nugget, another thought. Today is the last week of June of 2020, and what a year it has been so far, hasn't it? Started out with incredible bad fires in Australia, moved into a pandemic, racial unrest. Pandemic won't go away. What a year it has been. It's been a year of stress and tears and sorrow and worry and pain and death for many people. And if your year has not been full of those things, give thanks, help those who are feeling down and low, and continue to do well. So I have a thought for you today based on looking through the book of Luke, chapter 6. We've been looking at stories from Dr. Luke, 4 Gospels in the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Luke is the third one. Luke was a doctor by trade, wasn't one of the original disciples of Jesus. It says in the beginning of his book that he studied it, he asked questions, he researched it out, he put it together, and he wanted to write a nice, complete storytelling of the life of Jesus. So there's lots of interesting stories and facts and little angles and additional details in the book of Luke that aren't in some of the other Gospels, and our story today has one of those. So in Luke chapter 6, there's a story about a man who comes to the synagogue, which was like the church, and he's less than perfect. He has physical deformities. Now, I don't know what your life has been like, if people have ever noticed anything about you that's physically not perfect. I mean, a lot of people have really strong, great disabilities. I fortunately don't, but I do remember as a young man, when I was younger, I was raised in a home where food was used to reward. Food was used when you were upset, you would eat. Food was used if you were bored, you would eat. Food was always there. Lots of food, good food, also sweet food, salty food, everything was there. I was raised with food, and I still love food. And so that made me what could be called, como se dice, pudgy. My mom bought me a couple pair of pants one time that were labeled husky. And I remember crying when I found out that they were husky. Pudgy, husky, chunky, solid, probably not really the F word, fat, but enough that I was very self-conscious about the way I looked, especially in the summer when guys and girls go to the pool, and when you go to the pool as a guy, of course, you have to take off your shirt. It made me very self-conscious. I was aware of not feeling normal, aware of being embarrassed and just waiting for somebody to say something. And inevitably, sometime during the summer, once or more than once, someone would say something, generally another guy thinking he's kidding, saying, "Man, you need to lose some weight," something like that. When you're 12 and 13 and 14, that's not the best thing to hear. Of course, I had to laugh it off or act like it didn't matter, and now here I am 50 years later, still remembering it. So there you go. That's the way things happen when you have physical disabilities, when you have physical limitations, when you have things that you are focused on, or you're aware of, you're embarrassed about, you're self-conscious about. Anyway, hopefully you get the picture. So in this story in Luke chapter 6, we find a man coming to the synagogue, and it says that he has a withered right hand, or a shriveled right hand. So there's something about his hand or his arm, his right one. Luke tells us it's the right one. Matthew and Mark also tell this story. They don't say it was the right hand, but leave it to the doctor to let us know it was the right hand. And maybe it was shriveled like this, I don't know, it doesn't say, but somehow this hand was unusable. And he's in the synagogue where probably he shouldn't have been, because the synagogue didn't like people who were less than perfect, or less than valuable, or less than as they should be. And there was the Pharisees and the scribes in the synagogue. The religious leaders were there not to worship, but to watch and accuse Jesus, it says. And he was up front teaching, sharing his new take on what it means to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And it was the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath. And the religious people had many rules about what you could and could not do on the Sabbath because it was a day of rest. And so they interpreted that as you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. You couldn't carry a mat. You couldn't do this. You could pull an ox out of the ditch if the ox would have died. But otherwise, there was a whole lot of things you couldn't do. They had 39 things you could and couldn't do on Sabbath. You couldn't harvest your crops. You couldn't thresh your wheat. You had to worship, and that was it. You had to rest, like in the sit, do nothing kind of idea. And Jesus wanted to challenge their ideas of what it meant to keep the Sabbath holy, what the Sabbath was all about. And so this man with the withered hand is there, and they were watching him to see what he would do to this man. So Jesus wanted to challenge them. So not only does he look at the man and see that he needs healing to make his life better, because he could have said to the man, "Psst, meet me out back. Afterwards, I'm going to take care of you." He could have said that. Or he could have waited till later in the week, but he not only wanted to heal the man, but he wanted to heal him now. You see, because Jesus wants to bring life. It says in John chapter 10, verse 10, "I have come that they might have life and they might have life abundantly." That's why Jesus came. And I cling to that verse many times. And that is his desire for me. That is his goal for me. That is what he wants me to have. Whether I understand what that means in this world or not, Jesus came that I might have life, and that life might be abundant. And so not only does he see this man with the withered hand who needs help, that he needs to be healed, and he knows there's people out there who want to accuse him, the Pharisees and the scribes, but he wants to heal this man, and so he wants to do it. He wants to teach them a lesson. And so he says to the man, "Come up front and stand here." So now here's a man with a physical disability who's being called up front, not only in front of people, but in front of the religious people of his community. And he's in the synagogue. He's like being called up front in church to stand in front of people. And he probably felt even worse than my little brief, silly story about being without a shirt at the pool. He felt socially awkward. He felt very self-conscious, I'm guessing. I'm using my sanctified imagination to imagine what he felt like. And I imagine that he took that right hand and he kept it somewhat behind his back. And it says that Jesus looked at him and he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath day or to do evil? Is it lawful to do good things or bad things?" And they didn't say anything because they knew the answer. Obviously, the answer would be to do good and not bad. And it says he looked at them, he was angry and heavy in his heart, that he knew that these religious leaders were thought nothing about not healing a man. And so I imagine the man's over there like, "Please, just get me out of here. I didn't know any of this was going to happen." And it says that Jesus told him, "Stretch out your hand." And in my mind, I imagine the man stretched out his left hand because that was a good one. And that Jesus said, "No, not the left one, the right one." And it says as he stretched out his hand was made whole. So Jesus brought healing to this man on the Sabbath day, when he could have very easily waited till after church. He could have waited till Saturday night when the sun went down. He could have waited till Sunday or Monday or Tuesday. He could have sent the man a note and said, "When you open this note, your hand's going to be whole." But he wanted to do it in front of the religious people to challenge their mindset on what it means to be a child of God in this world. What it means when you see suffering. What do you do when you see suffering around you? And I'm telling you that the church today needs to be going about its business of bringing healing and bringing goodness and spreading love to this world. The time has passed for the church to be a place where you come and you sit and you compare scripture with scripture and you debate like it's theological tennis. Well, I think this, well, I think that. It doesn't really matter what you think anymore, it's what you do. Because the call is not only to believe, but to do based on your beliefs. So it's all right to believe what you want to believe about God on the Bible. But when you have those thoughts now, God is a God of love. and he believes this, and he calls me to action, then you need to get up off of your seat and move into action. When you see people who are suffering, when you see people who have less than you, when you see people who have a need, when you see people whose rights have been denied, when you see people who've been mistreated, when you see people who have been abused, when you see people who are silent because they're in fear, it is the mandate of the church to stand up and to do something. And if you're not a member of a church, that's all right. But your call is still to do something, because you are a human on this earth, and you are a child of God, whether you know it and believe it yourself. And it says that the religious leaders, as they saw what Jesus did, it said that they were, the King James Version, which uses really some cool words, said that they were filled with madness. Other versions say they were furious. They were filled with fury, which means they were so upset they can't even think straight. Because here was this man doing what the Bible and God actually said, to bring healing to this world. And it says afterwards that they got up after church and went out and conferred with the Herodians, meaning like the civil leaders. So the religious leaders and the police state got together. How do we handle this Jesus? Because he was upsetting their religious apple cart. He was bringing new life to old scriptures. He was putting new wine in new wineskins and not going along with the old wineskins and drinking the old bitter wine. His was a call to action. He cared about the oppressed. He cared about the downtrodden. He cared about women. He cared about sinners. He cared about the outcasts. He cared. And that's his call to you and me, to care. We can't solve every problem, but we can do something today. You and I can do something to make this world a better place. So I'll leave you with that, a call to action, to get up, stand up, do something for good, for love, for God. God bless you, and I will see you another time.